All right, so it's 10 o'clock, so I'm going to begin. Welcome to my class of Korean Contemporary Art. It's a great pleasure for me to have a chance to talk about Korean art with you today. Well, it's 10 o'clock in the morning in South Korea. I don't know where you are right now, but anyway, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. All right, so I'm going to share my slide in order to begin. But if you're there, I see some of the students here. Can you please turn off your video just for a second, just to make it sure that I am talking to the actual people? If you can, if you don't mind. All right, great, thank you. Hi. All right, then I'm going to share my slide. So you see my slide clearly? Can you wave your hand if you see my slide? Okay, great, thank you. All right, my name is Jung-Ah, and I'm teaching art history here at POSTECH. Just for your information, POSTECH is in Pohang in South Korea. You know where Seoul is? Seoul is right, oh sorry. Seoul is right in the middle of the Korean peninsula, and Pohang is the southern eastern tip of Korean peninsula. And also this is the city of home of POSCO. POSCO is one of the largest steel manufacturing companies in the whole world. And POSTECH is Pohang University of Science and Technology. And POSTECH and POSCO was kind of associated very well. POSTECH, the school itself, was established like 30 years ago. And then both institutions led the foundation of Korea's development of industry, economy, scientific research, and technological advancement. So if you hear South Korea, maybe the first things that pop up in your mind is BTS, the popular boy band, and then Samsung, the Galaxy, the cell phone, or both of them can be combined like this. But for the generation of my parents, maybe the grandparents' generation for you, the most popular image that are associated with South Korea is MASH, especially for the Euro-American audiences. MASH is an American TV drama series. It was aired from 1972 to 1933. It was a comedy drama based on the episode of the field surgical doctors during the Korean War. So Korean War was lasted from 1950 to 1953. So it lasted for 3 years. But actually the TV show itself ran much longer than the actual war. It was more than 10 years, and it was one of the most high-rated TV drama in American history. And also it was the most large audience members in the American history of drama. So the popular image of Korea for that generation was war devastated and poor country. So people are starving and then the land is barren. So that was kind of like a popular image, right? So I'm going to show you 3 photographs of Seoul in the 1960s, 1980s, and 2000s. Believe it or not, this is a photograph of a same spot. So here in Seoul, there's a Cheonggae stream, and in the 1960s, it was the slum area, like the poorest of the poor outclass of Seoul were living here. And after that, that stream was completely buried underground, and then this high-rising freeway was constructed. And in 2000s, that high-rising highways were again completely removed, and this stream came back, and then this neighborhood was developed into a popular leisure spot for the Seoul citizens. So you can realize that within 3 decades, Korea experienced a drastic development and then intense economical development. That speed was really fast. So here I'm going to show you a simple graph. And then you can explain in many different ways that the rapid economical and industrial development of South Korea, but people usually say that Koreans are hardworking, and then the education ambition was very high, And at the same time, we had from the late 1960s up until late 1980s, we had a very oppressive government. Basically, some of the people call it military dictatorship. So somehow these elements are combined together to make South Korea as of today. So I'm going to introduce you today for most prominent Korean artists, but they are quite active around these days too. So no matter where you are right now, if you go to museums, contemporary museums around you, you may find one or two of these works. So Suh Do-Ho and Inhwan, Lee Bul, and Choi Jeonghwa, and I'm going to show you these four artists. But there are many Korean artists, but these are kind of the exemplary for me. And then you will realize that they were all born in the 1960s. So I believe that these artists share certain generational experiences. They were born in the 1960s. They eyewitnessed the drastic economic development of South Korea. And then they also educated under this very oppressive military dictatorship. And at the same time, they benefit from the economic growth. And then they experienced the democratization movement. Sometimes it was very violent. And then they see this globalized environment of Korea and the earth, right? So they are quite active across the globe. But I believe that this kind of same generational experiences are reflected in their artworks, even though they use whole different materials and their artworks are very different in many ways. But still, I believe that that can say about the Korean society. And then this Korean society, their experiences can be very specific. But at the same time, the reason why these artists were well received in global audience members is because that in this globalized environment, their specific and individual experiences can be universally interpreted. So the first artist is Suh Do-Ho. Who am we? You would immediately realize that there is something wrong in that phrase. All right, this is Suh Do-Ho's work. Here I wrote it Do-Ho. Suh is the family name, and in many Asian names, the family name comes first, right? So here I saw this work in the Stanford University, and when you walk into the gallery, this is the work. It's basically a wallpaper, and there is a magnifying glass. You pick it up, you look at it closely, and you will realize that there are many photographs of individual portraiture, right? So the artist scanned 30,000 photographs of a high school yearbook in Korea, and then he printed it on a sheet of paper, just like a printing pixels. So when you look at those faces closely, you will realize that they are all different individuals. They are different, but still it's not very easy to discern because they have more or less similar hairstyles and outfits. Because in Korea, in many schools still, we have mandatory hairstyle and mandatory uniform in most of them. So somehow the individual and private characteristics are kind of like suppressed into this collective identity. So Suh Do-Ho this is his early work, and he was really conscious about this dialectic between individuality and group identity and collectivity, right? And especially in Korean society, like the family is much more important than individual, and the society is much important than the individual families, right? So always the greater whole is much more important. So the individuals were kind of educated to sacrifice their own interest for the good of, or the welfare of the collective whole, right? So somehow Suh Do-Ho was really conscious of that. So high school uniform. So let's go back to the title of it, sorry. So who am we? You will realize that am is the singular verb and we is collectivity. So somehow this we works like a single entity, right? So here too, Suh Do-Ho installed 300 high school uniform jackets, and then it's like arranged like a marching squad, but their shoulder seams are sewn together. So this is not a 300 jackets. This is one whole body. And then he also made a grammatical twist here because uniform is uniform. But when you divide these words, you will realize that uniform actually emphasizes that singular identity of those, a lot of individuals. So here, Suh Do-Ho, well, this is the scene maybe to explain Suh Do-Ho's and the ordinary Korean males' personal experiences. This is the morning gathering in schools. So all the students are wearing the same uniform. They are stand in a very neat and tight row. And then they have to listen to the principal's speech. And then in high school and after 20 years old, the military train was mandatory for all Korean males. So later, Suh Do-Ho created, this is the work when he was 39 years old. This is kind of like a transitory groups that the artist had to belong from when he was a little kid. So kindergarten, elementary school, middle school, high school, university, and then military, base, right? So this is kind of the groups that, as an ordinary Korean male, the artist had to belong to, right? So he had to wear all these kind of uniforms in order to make it sure that he is belong to a certain group, right? So here, Suh Do-Ho was appointed as the representative artist of Korea Pavilion in the year 2001, Venice Biennale. It was a very prestigious position as an artist. And he presented public figures in the garden of Venice Biennale. And you see quite large size of podium, right? So, or let's call it pedestal. This type of pedestal in public garden like this, usually the base for a single statue. It's a single public statue, right? So usually a single national hero is standing on top of the pedestal and he or she is looking down on the viewers, right? So the viewers had to naturally have this upward movement. They have to look up the statue. They have to look up the national hero. But Suh Do-Ho left his pedestal empty. And then after some time lasted, the audience members will look down on it, and underneath the pedestal, there are a lot of small figurines here. So all very different age groups, men and women, they are holding up this very heavy pedestal all together. So this is Suh Do-Ho's idea about community or a nation. Right? Usually we believe that a single hero, a military hero usually, right, sacrifices his or her life in order to save the nation. That is kind of the very typical narrative of public statues like this. But Suh Do-Ho emphasized the function of individuals. This anonymous masses of people are actually supporting this heavy weight of a community, a nation, or a society. So here he emphasized this sense of a fraternity and sense of belonging together. So when I see Suh Do-Ho's work, it is not a flat criticism against the oppressive nature of a society, but it's kind of like an interdependence of individuals and a group of people or a collectivity, right? So sometimes the society can be very suppressive and oppressive to the individuals, but at the same time, the individual citizens can feel safe or comfortable with this sense of belonging. So this is kind of like the comparison. Where if you have any chance to come to Seoul, right at the heart of the city of Seoul, this is the kind of the most well-known public monument. This is General Lee, who saved the nation by sacrificing his own life in the 16th century. So he is the 16th century naval hero. So this is kind of the very typical national monument but somehow Suh Do-Ho converted this logic or the principle of public monument in order to emphasize the anonymous society. Alrighty, so he had a lot of different versions of the work, and that is very interesting to look at. So if you have a chance to look at his work, it will be really nice. Some of the work you can actually step on these individuals. So these are tiny, tiny little figurines, like smaller than your palm. And then this is thick glass, so you can step on it. You can walk over this massive people. So Suh Do-Ho's most popular work is actually this fabric house. So this is hanok. Hanok means traditional Korean house, tiled walls, tiled roof, and then paper window and a wooden structure with a lot of decorative details. And this is actually where this is actually the exact copy of Suh Do-Ho's Seoul home. But after the artist graduated from a university in Korea, he went to the States at first to pursue the graduate studies in art. And then if you have any, well, of course, if you have chances to leave your home, and if you have to spend a night in a strange place, you will miss your home, right? So that kind of nostalgia, homesickness, that was pretty reflected in this work, because Suh Do-Ho made an exact copy of his Seoul home in fabric with embroidery and needlework. And actually, this is really massive, but when you fold it, it can fit into a suitcase so that you can carry it all around the world, right? So that was kind of like his dream, right? If you can travel with your own home, it will be very nice, right? So after that, here you're looking at the installation shot of his solo show in Leum Samsung Museum in Seoul in 2012. He made exact copies of every home he dwelt, right? In New York, in Berlin, in London. So you can see those different style of houses in the background. So this is his first work, Seoul home, LA home, his Seoul home, exact copy in translucent fabric installed in Los Angeles. So here he created every detail of it. And in order to make the exact copy of his home, he had to look at every corner of his own house, right? So this is how he left his nostalgia. He forget about his homesickness, because now his house became public, like a lot of audience members can look at it. And even though I'm Korean, I've never lived in this type of traditional house, right? It's very rare, actually. And then the audience members from global community, like if you're in America or if you're from Chile, but all these audience members somehow, interestingly and curiously, felt nostalgia while they look at this ghost home, right? So I believe that Suh Do-Ho's work is not about a single person, but it is about the global condition of every human being, right? Because somehow we are not living at home these days. So for example, Pohang is not my hometown. So I feel always kind of like a stranger. And at the same time, I always have the sense of nostalgia, right? So that universal kind of condition of globalized society is reflected in the reaction of the global audiences of Suh Do-Ho's work, I believe. And if you have any chance to go to San Diego in California, this is really interesting work. So Suh Do-Ho had this idea. It's like a fantastic idea. What if his home travel across the sky and then crash it into his current home, right? So Fallen Star is a big project in year 2012. And this work is in a campus of UC San Diego. It's a very typical small townhouse of America's East Coast. And it is like a fallen star. It flew across the sky and crashed on the top of the engineering building like this. So and then, you know, California is the west coast of America, and then this east coast townhouse is kind of like, you know, collapsed into this engineering building. So it gives this kind of like a common sense of fantastic idea about what if my home travels across the sky and arrived to me, right? So this is really interesting work. So if you have any chance to go to San Diego, I highly recommend to see this. All right, I'm going to talk about my second artist, Oh In-Hwan. Now this is, you are looking at a clip of an interview, and I'm going to explain that. Okay, Oh In-Hwan, his very well-known work is Where He Meets Him, right? So this is how the artist is, you know, making installation of that work. You know, the wooden incense, just in case you don't know, the wooden incense is this like a tiny little like a wooden stick, and if you lit on it, it burns, of course, and it has smoke and very good scent actually, right? So prevalently in Asia, we use this wooden incense for the ceremonies for the ancestors like this, or funerals, or the Buddhist temples. So basically this smoke is the smoke and scent is the offering for the spirits, not for the actual people, right? And Oh In-Hwan powdered, basically grind the wooden incense to make very fine powder. And then with this powder, he spread over the floor of the installation, the gallery, and he wrote letters. And then these letters are actually the names of the gay bars and gay clubs in that city. So here he installed this work in Nantes in France, and then he researched that city and he found out the gay bars and he wrote the names of it. And when the exhibition opens up, he lit on it. So during the duration of the show, this work is burning, basically, really, it's really burning. So I'm going to, so the work is very physical in two sense, because you are looking at it, right? And then this is like a visual sensation, but actually you smell it. And as you know, when you smell something, it's the odor molecule, it's really penetrating into your body through your nose or through your mouth, right? So somehow this is really physically penetrating to your body. And at the end, after the end of the show, when you wipe away the work, the ashes, it left like the burned scars in the ground. So somehow it is very interesting because you can clearly read these words, right? Because you can read Korean, you can read French if you're living in France, right? But if you are not really familiar with the gay community in that city, all those words doesn't make any sense to you, right? It's meaningless. So somehow Oh In-Hwan shows you that the language is not perfect. It works for some people, but for some others it doesn't work, right? And at the same time, the work is very paradoxical, because only after the work was completely destroyed, the words become clear, right? And then after the exhibition is closed, the work will be removed, but it left a scar on the ground. So there is a art critic say that Oh In-Hwan is speaking an unspeakable love, because especially in South Korea, homosexuality has long been taboo, especially for the conservative Confucian ideology that dominated for many centuries the Korean society. And in Korea, there are a lot of very persistent, intolerant group of conservative Christians. So they basically reject homosexuality. So that is why Oh In-Hwan kind of devised this idea of a work, vulnerable, transitory. It doesn't last long, but somehow it's very physical, right? So this is a short video because in 10 years, quite recently, he installed this work again in Seoul, and I took a video. It's really interesting because it's really burning in the exhibition hall, and it smells, well, that smoke and smell is pretty nice, but it's like everywhere in the entire building. But don't worry, it doesn't, you know, burn the entire museum. But anyway, so all right, okay, let's go to the next slide. And this is another one of his early works, the things of friendship. So Oh In-hwan was also interested in the identity formation and how one's very specific identity is accepted by the society or rejected or hidden, right? Or like, you know, covered. Right, so here this project is really interesting because artist asked his very close friend to visit his or her home. And then the artist friend allowed him to look at every corner of the house in order to find out the things that both of the people have in common, right? So after the artist find out the same things that the friend and the artist have, he just collect them and take photograph like this, like a mirror image. And then he installed those things in the gallery with the photograph of it, right? So here it looks like, excuse me, this is a detergent for laundry and salt. It's a Metro card in New York City, so you will realize that if you can recognize it, you realize that, oh, the artist worked in New York at the time. And Spartacus is a tourist guidebook for gay community, right? So, and on the museum's ruins, this is very a famous book of contemporary art, and I also have that book too. So here, here when you look at these things, you have some understanding, right? He's gay, living in New York, and he cooks himself, right? And the when he visited other friend's house, the things he found out in that house, the nature is completely different. When you look at closely, there are a lot of books, minimal art, art in theory, the world of Namjoon Park. These are the contemporary art books, and a lot of these books also I have them too, right? So when you look at these photo shots, you will realize that the artist is, you know, someone who is related to contemporary art scene, right? So in this way, Oh In-hwan shows how a person, one's subjectivity or identity is formulated in relationship to others, right, surrounding you, right? And how to define yourself, how to define your friendship, how that friendship created. It tells a lot about this kind of like interdependence with, you know, the of the relationship in order to make oneself, right? And in the year 2015, Oh In-hwan was nominated as one of the candidates for Korea Artist Prize. Korea Artist Prize is a very prestigious prize organized by the National Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art in Korea. And it was supported by SBS, the media company. Well, the four candidates installed their works, and then after the duration of the exhibition, the winner is announced. And the year 2015's winner of Korea Artist Prize was Oh In-hwan, and I'm going to show you what he installed in this National Institute. So the reciprocal viewing system is the title of the work, and actually this specific work is finding the blind spots. Finding the blind spots. So so he installed his works in two different spaces in the same building, and you know, if you approach the gallery, you see two monitors like this. And this monitor shows the CCTV video, right? You understand that in MMCA, it's a national museum, in every gallery and in every corner of the building, there are CCTVs for surveillance reasons, for security reasons, for safety reasons, right? And Inhwan utilized that CCTV. It was originally installed by the institution. So when you walk into the gallery, you look at the monitor. This is the scene that you are looking at. This is a very clean, very calm, nothing is wrong, right? But when you walk into it, you will see a completely different space from the one on the monitor. Here it is. So Inhwan covered the parts of the walls in pink box tapes. So these are the blind spots, which means that these are the space outside of the CCTV's angle, right? So before you walk into the space, you believe that CCTVs are pretty powerful, right? It looks you, right? It looks everything. But by his work, you will realize that actually there are pretty large space are outside of the surveillance cameras angles, right? There are a lot of blind spots. That's what Inhwan tries to show you. And that's what Inhwan thought is really important to do this specific project in this national museum, because National Museum itself, this is an artistic institution, but still it's part of the government system, right? So the surveillance, the CCTV cameras and surveillance systems, every individual is kind of like agreed upon the need of these surveillance tools, right? So they kind of accepted to be seen, to be looked at, to be controlled all the time, right? And Inhwan wants to reject that. If you try hard, you will find some blind spots that reject this governmental suppressive tools, these surveillance cameras. And then you have to find out that free spaces to go away from the control, the governmental controls. That's what he is believing, right? So this is pretty interesting work. And then he did the same project in many different locations across the globe. So this is Asia Corridor Contemporary Art Exhibition. This was in Japan in the year 2017. So you will realize that actually that CCTV cameras has a very narrow perspective, right? There's a lot of space of this, galleries covered with the pink tapes. And here, there was a very interesting episode, because the reason why Inhwan insists that his work is quite vulnerable, but a lot of his work are just transitory. There is no permanent works. So everything is temporary installation. And after the exhibition ends, his work is just gone, it's removed. And the reason why he makes his own work vulnerable, changeable, and transitory is because he believed that his own identity as a gay male artist in Korea is vulnerable and changeable. It's always kind of susceptible to the changes of his own environment. So he doesn't believe the myth of artist. The artist is someone great, someone very authoritative, some very creative power behind the work. But the system of this Korea artist prize itself is promoting the artist, right? Not only the artwork, but also the purpose of this prize system is to make that artist popular, famous, and kind of promote his or her work, right? So even though the Inhwan participated with this governmental prize, but he, as far as he could, he tried to reject that kind of the institutionalized system. So this is the interview, excuse me. So these are other candidates, and people believe that this is Inhwan, and because he explained his own work, he even took part in the opening ceremony of the show. And even the closing ceremony, the prize, also this person received prize for Oh In-hwan, but actually he was an actor. And Oh In-hwan hired this actor to play the role of an artist Oh In-hwan, because he believed that the artist believed that that specific person is not that important, right? What is really important is the message of his work and how his work works, right? So this kind of like heroic like a status of the artist is not important for him. So that was very fun because I know the artist personally, but this actor like really perfectly works really well to become Oh In-hwan in a lot of ceremonies. And within this work, Oh In-hwan inserted a lot of, short sentences. And these sentences are from the interviews that he had with the soldiers in military base. As I said, with Suh Do-Ho's work, like all the Korean males, it's mandatory to serve the military for a certain period of time. And then military base is the very extreme place where your personal desire, your personal need to be suppressed, right? You have to serve the military. But still, within that environment, people find some little blind spot that can pursue their own private desire, their own private need. And then Oh In-hwan, the artist, interviewed these soldiers, how to find your secret place within that military base. And then there are a lot of life wisdoms. Keep all possibilities open because there are more blind spots that are ineffectively managed than you would expect. Be innovative and be brave, right? So he is like Oh In-hwan is telling that try to reject, try to escape this social surveillance. This is his message. All right, my third artist is Choi Jeonghwa's Plastic Paradise. Choi Jeonghwa looks like this. He looks like a Buddhist monk. This is one of his early work. He piled up a very red plastic baskets. It's really cheap, ordinary plastic baskets. And on top of it, he installed trophies. But these are also very cheap, golden gilded trophies. He just installed it. And the title, Spring of Plastic. And Choi Jeonghwa's typical stylistic vocabulary is this, images of ordinary urban environment. If you walk around Seoul, you will encounter the building really looks like this. And then the building is covered with very colorful flank cards. It's for advertisement, right? It's a promotion for small businesses. It's really eye-catching. And it's really catchy installations. And he has made fun of it at the same time. And he loves it and plays with all those images of this urban environment. So here, and he piled up those plastic baskets like this. And then these are silicone models of the actual vegetables. And then the plastic models of policemen. And he is colorful. A lot of the plastic baskets are piled up together, make a grand view, right? So even though these are really trivial, cheap, ordinary, there's no value, these objects, but through the hands of the artist, they're piled up, and it has this very, surprising kind of visual sensation. It's really shocking at some point. So his materials are usually very cheap and colorful, like balloons. And this is the party interior design by Choi Jeonghwa in the LA Museum. And people just loved it. This kitschy, glamorous, glaring, too extremely decorative objects. And here's another work. So I want to briefly explain the cultural background when Choi Jeonghwa became the artist in the late 1980s. in the late 1980s, Korean art world was kind of divided into two sectors. Monochrome. Monochrome is one color, or in Korean, 단색화. And then 민중미술. 민중미술 means people's or masses art, right? So these two sectors, monochrome, as you see, it's an abstract painting. It's pretty dominant artistic movement from the 1970s up until the end of 1980s. And the artists emphasized this monotone colors and very repetitive, gestures of the artist. And they emphasized spirituality, contemplation, and physical discipline. And, the artist claimed that their artistic practices are rooted in this Oriental tradition, right? Like calligraphy or ink wash painting. And on the contrary, 민중미술 or the people's art movement was by leftist intellectuals, leftist artists who emphasized the reality. They believed that artwork should represent the harsh reality of Korean society at the time. But quite interestingly, these two sectors are kind of, compete with each other, but both of them are relying on the tradition, right? The tradition of spirituality and calligraphy. And on the right side, the tradition of woodcut print or the people's art from the Joseon dynasty, right? But Choi Jeonghwa believed that what is tradition of these days? What represent Korean society the best at the time? And he believed that that's plastic, because plastic is the one that is really prevalent in our own daily life. And then plastic is the material that can explain the nature of Korean society of the 20th century. That is what he believed. So here, Korea, what I just briefly mentioned about the economic development of Korea, and then the plastic industry was on the foundation of it, right? And then the hardworking Koreans, and then their pursuit for the cost efficiency. The plastic is really cost-efficient material. It's cheap, fast, and you can create massive number of things in a very quick time, right? So somehow that nature, it should be fast, it should be cheap, and it should be efficient. That was kind of like the let's call it ideology that laid the foundation of Korea's rapid economic development and industrialization. And Choi Jeonghwa believed that that has the power of Korean society, even though you may feel it's too vulgar and it's too kitschy. But he believed that power of that ambition, power of the desire to be well, right? So Choi Jeonghwa, the artist, always found the inspiration of his artist's work in a marketplace or the ordinary workers in the marketplace. And now I excerpt a short passage from Roland Barthes, a French thinker. He wrote in 1957 about the wonder of plastic. Thanks to the plastic, the hierarchy of substance is abolished because a single one replaces the all, right? The plastic, the plasticity, the word itself refers to the, you can make anything out of it, right? You can make gold, you can make glass, you can make brush, you can make, of steel, whatever you want to, right? So the Roland Barthes in 1957, he said, the entire world can be plasticized. The plastic can make everything, right? So somehow this ubiquitous nature and malleability means that it's changeable to any form, and it's very fast and easy. So somehow Choi Jeonghwa believed that the Korean society went through that kind of plastic process in the fast industrialization and rapid economical development. So here he got inspiration from the ordinary marketplace, the colorful brushes. These are just, brooms, right? But when Choi Jeonghwa installed them as an artwork in a museum, they look beautiful somehow. So Choi Jeonghwa believed that all these trivial things, cheap things, people don't think they are beautiful, but when you look at them closely, you will realize that actually they are so beautiful, right? Okay, so on the right side, that's Choi Jeonghwa's artwork. And on the left side, this is the ordinary street market. And on the left side again, this is where the street vendors amass their products to go around the city to sell them. And on the right side, this is how Choi Jeonghwa installed his artwork in the museum. Left side, Market Street. Right side, Choi Jeonghwa's artwork. And he kind of enlarged these flowers, and it's really fun to look at, and they are really pretty. When you look at them, they make you feel good, right? That is the core of Choi Jeonghwa's work, I believe. So here, this is in the center of Seoul. So this is my my favorite quotation from the artist. Between a plastic flower and a real flower, which one is disposable? We believe that plastic is disposable object, but no, the real flower, it wouldn't last long. It will dry out, it will die, it will perish. But plastic flowers, they will be beautiful forever, right? So that's what he believed in, the value of plasticity. And in the year 2013, he installed this huge work called Kabbalah Alchemy. He kind of knotted this 5,700 plastic baskets into this huge, overwhelming scale to entirely dominate this huge museum space. So he believed that somehow, I think that, you know, plastic, that nature, the amazing transformation, a surprising metamorphosis, was the kind of symbolic representation of Korean society of the 20th century. This is really dazzling installation. Okay, so this is recent work. Choi Jeonghwa's recent work is Stone Age. So it really looks like a stone tower, but actually these are made of styrofoams. Styrofoam buoys on the ocean for the cultivation of oysters, that kind of things, and it's cheap. And it's used massively in, across the globe, but it's, becomes trash, the ocean trash pretty soon, and it became the source of the pollution, the ocean pollution. But when you look at it, it looks like a stone, right? So Choi Jeonghwa always tries to find out the fine line between what is nature and what is artificial, right? What is natural and what is artificial? What is the real and what is the fake, right? So he always kind of walking the fine dividing line between the two. And this is also his recent work. He titled it Anthropocene. So somehow his interest in plastic led him to this environmental problems these days. All right, so finally, my last artist, Lee Bul. This is how she looks. So from early on, Lee Bul also used very cheap plastic materials because those are the ones she could afford. She could afford at the time because she had this, private memory of his family because her family, her parents was involved in some political activism, so they had to lead a life of a fugitive. So for this underclass families, the only source of income was the very simple chore of her mother, like, making cheap necklaces with the, plastic beads or sequins. So somehow this cheap, colorful plastic beads and sequins are very familiar material around the artist. So she used this into beautiful artwork like this. And alibi is actually the silicone cast of the artist's hand, but it's really paradoxical, and at the same time, it has a lot of conflicting values because can the artist's hand, but well, she came from a sculpture department of a very prestigious art school in Korea, but up until the late 1980s, women were regarded as not really qualified to become a great sculptor, right? So somehow she cast her female hand and decorated it with very beautiful and decorative the hair pins and hair accessories, and plunged it into the hand, the dead butterfly. So beauty and violence, the female's value and are kind of combined together to create something beautiful, but at the same time, it's really horrible, right? So that kind of conflicting values are prevalent in her work. I'm going to skip this. And this is what made Lee Bul very scandalous. So she decorated the fish with sequins, beads, and hair accessories like this. And her original plan was to let these fish decay in the museum. Then you will realize that it becomes ugly and horrible, and and at the same time it has very bad odor, right? It smells really bad. So somehow this is how she wants to rebel against the values of museums, something beautiful, something clean, and something like eternal, right? But somehow she kind of subvert all those values with this work. So here, this is how it works. You have this very fresh fish, beautifully decorated, but you will eyewitness how those flesh becomes like really a dead body, right? So Lee Bul was really kind of interested in this transformation, something beautiful, something wonderful. In a moment, it becomes the scene of death and horror, right? And that was her consistent concern. And now you see this is willing to be vulnerable. This is the installation view of the Biennale of Sydney. And you will recognize what this is. This is a German achievement of technology in the 1930s. It was a utopian achievement of science and technology. It was kind of like an airplane. But as you see, it burned in the air. It is totally collapsed. So somehow now this is Zeppelin. This is the aircraft created by Germans in the 1930s. Then it became the icon of the dream of technology, but at the same time, failure of technology. And Lee Bul was pretty conscious with that. So a lot of her artworks look beautiful, glittering, it's glamorous, but somehow it has this sense of devastation, destruction, and violence. So it looks like some beautiful utopian city was once there, but now it remained as ruins, right? So that was kind of like a sensibility, it's a conflicting sensibility of her work. And then she once talked about her personal memory about urban disasters that happened in Korea in the late 20th century. We had a lot of urban accidents, huge disasters, plane crashed, bridge collapsed, luxurious department store collapsed in 10 seconds. And then there was a huge explosion in the subway station. So somehow at the end of 1990s, Koreans experienced these urban disasters. And we believe that this is the ruins of that dream of utopia, the fast development, the rapid industrialization. And we believe that like our future will be pinkish, it will be beautiful, but somehow this, a belief in utopia, belief in science and technology can bring you ruins at a moment, right? So that's what Lee Bul was constantly conscious of it. So here she presented Cyborg series. It's a beautiful, perfect, idealized body of a female cyborg. It should be perfect body, but it always missing a limb or two. And that image had a lot of references from classical Greek goddess or Japanese popular animation or Western art, nude tradition. So she's saying that my cyborgs are all missing organs or limbs, so they are incomplete bodies. And she wants to criticize the cult of technology, right? And then also there is this gender issues. The masters of technology are always male, and then the female bodies are vulnerable against it. And then what interests her is this kind of conflicting values between the gender and also the technology and advancement and its failure. And so here we are looking at Mongrang Hesi. This is also like seems like a beautiful installation of a utopian city. It also has a lot of references like the Tatlins, the Russian artist of the early 20th century, the monuments for the Third International, and you can easily recognize this is the Eiffel Tower in Paris, and this is Bruno Taut's dome, these utopian constructions. All these are combined together in Ibul's artwork, but somehow they are melted down. It seems like we are looking at the ruins in the far future, right? So she always had this consciousness of the violence and aggression of technology. Okay, and then she is asking us to look back what our goal is and what we are doing well and what we are doing good. All right, so so I'm going to wrap up my lecture soon. This is last year, Korean art from 1953, collision, innovation, and interaction. There are a lot of, interest in Korean contemporary art, and this is kind of like a first comprehensive survey book to introduce Korean art after the Korean War. It was highly well received. Okay, so if you become a little bit interested in Korean art, this is kind of the recommendation for your reference. All right, I'm going to stop my lecture here. And then if you have any question or comments, whatever, you can use the chatting or you can just, ask me questions right now. All right. No. So you will easily find out my email address if you want to. Okay, then I'm going to stop here. Thank you all for coming, and I wish my lecture was a little bit helpful for widen your perspective about Korean art and art in general. So I believe that all these Korean artists' personal, private, individual interest will be kind of universalized in this global environment. All right, have a good day and hope I see you again in the future in offline. Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye. Take care.
Bye.